Welcome to the Wild Physio podcast with your host, Andrew Wild. Today, Ellie Pashley is back by popular demand. The first two episodes went berserk and they were a huge success. And she's a very modest person, so she'll hate hearing that. Welcome back to Ellie.
Thanks, Laudy. Thanks for having me back.
There's a couple of sports docs here in Sydney that often send their running patients those two podcasts when you were on back a couple of years
Really?
ago. Yeah, they love them. So they use them
Oh,
as a
that's nice.
resource for all their runners. So I had to get you back, and you've got big news. You're a mother now.
Yeah, yep. So had a baby 11 months ago and yeah, same same person, but yeah, just have a baby that hangs around with me everywhere I go now.
Boy or girl?
Girl.
Yep. How's motherhood going?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Yeah, I've actually really enjoyed it. Probably more than I thought I would. I was a little bit unsure, not unsure about it, but I wasn't particularly maternal, I'd say. But yeah, no, it's been really good. It's been really fun so far. So yeah.
One of the biggest reasons I wanted to get you back today is to talk about your journey of running throughout the pregnancy and also postpartum. So, first of all, let's do this. We're going to just go through a couple of yes, no, or maybe questions to start with. And then
Yep.
we'll talk about your journey during your pregnancy and also what you would recommend as a physiotherapist and running coach for women that are either running through their pregnancy or running after a pregnancy. So, try and answer with a yes, no, or maybe. Can women who have been medically cleared to do so run during the first and second trimester of their pregnancy?
Yes.
Can women who have been medically cleared to do so run during the third trimester of their pregnancy?
Yes.
Is running while pregnant contraindicated for women with certain medical conditions?
Uh, yes. Probably some. Yep.
Yep. Should women use RPE rather than heart rate to manage their training intensity while pregnant and running?
Uh, I think it depends. I think if you know what your maximum heart rate is and you have a heart rate strap, I think you can use that. If you don't, then RPE is probably going to be the best gauge of how hard you're going
Yep.
when training whilst pregnant.
If you weren't running at all before becoming pregnant, is it a good idea to take up running when pregnant?
I think traditionally they've said no, but I think yeah, I mean there are a lot of different how would I say I
Opinions?
think yeah, exactly. And I don't necessarily think that um when you I don't think you shouldn't start anything just because you're pregnant, but yeah, if it's running and you're coming off never running in your whole life, then maybe there are some better options. But there's no if you've run in the past, I mean there's no reason why you can try it again. You just would seek medical advice first.
Yeah, and start slow.
Start very slow. Yeah.
Yeah, and slowly build it up. Last one. Can a woman who has been medically cleared to do so strength train throughout her pregnancy?
Yes.
And did you?
Yes.
Great work.
Yeah.
Well done. They're done. The yes, no, or
Thank you.
maybe.
Yeah. It's a bit of a tricky topic, like because there are so many variables, I think. So some of my yes, no, maybe answers were a bit long-winded, but yeah, that's kind of the
Tradition,
nature of this topic.
indeed. Traditionally, a lot of people would probably see a woman running out on the street while she was pregnant, and especially if she was down, into a third trimester and she definitely had more of a baby bump, and they would think, oh my God, what's she doing? She shouldn't be doing that. And you just answered then that women in their third trimester, if medically cleared, can run. Why is that the case? And also, why do you think the paradigm or the narrative has shifted to being able to do that rather than previously it was like, nah, let's wrap them all in cotton wool, all these women that are pregnant?
Yeah, I think we just have a lot more knowledge these days, and like you said, it like many years ago, it wasn't recommended that people exercise, particularly at a high intensity whilst pregnant. But I think the big thing there was because they didn't really know what it would do. It wasn't that they had any evidence that it was going to do anything bad, but they just didn't know. So they made some assumptions about things. And it still happens today. Like, I got some funny comments running during my pregnancy, particularly from older women, I would say, were the most vocal. And yeah, I think it's shifting. It's definitely shifting now. And I think education's much better for women when they're going through that. But yeah, they've, like, nowadays they're finding, there are so many benefits to doing exercise whilst pregnant in all forms. So yeah, it's actually something that's encouraged now rather than discouraged.
Yeah, for sure. And what I've read with the research in the last week or so, just getting prepared for this podcast, was during a pregnancy, if one does exercise, it's lowering the incidence of gestational weight gain, gestational diabetes, gestational hypertensive disorders, preterm birth, cesarean birth, and lower birth weight. So it sounds like it's a no-brainer to
Yeah,
exercise. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that I mean, um, they're still trying to work out the parameters as far as, particularly with intensity, and duration and exercising the heat and things like that. But I think now there are some sort of general guidelines about what they know is safe, and what is encouraged. And like, they're encouraging actually quite a bit of exercise. I think it's 150 minutes of moderate
Yep.
intensity exercise a week, which is, yeah, probably a lot more than a lot of pregnant women are doing. So
So
yeah.
other than those 150 minutes per week, what are some of the other guidelines if we delve deeper into, say, the running side of things and also strength training?
Yeah, so running wise, to be honest, I actually found it really difficult when I was pregnant to get information about this. And
Mm,
my running was purely based off self-research. So I spoke to my GP, I spoke a little to the VIS, to my strength and conditioning coach, and sports doctors there, and it's changing now. Like, they're trying to have information available to people going through this, but at that particular time, my GP told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing, which at the time was running 160 k's a week because I was training for a marathon.
yeah.
And I was like, and like going pretty hard, 3 days a week. Um, and my strength and conditioning coach was like, I don't really know. I'm going to go away and try and find out. So he, as far as adjusting my program at the time, I was doing a lot of plyometrics, some, what I would say heavy lifting, which you would describe as not heavy at all. Um, but it was like a fairly strenuous strength program. And yeah, even the sports doc, they were just all a little bit unsure. I think just because of the nature of my sport too, like, my training is fairly intense. So yeah, I did a lot of research, and basically what I uh, simplified it to for myself was keeping my heart rate below kind of 80 to 90% of my max heart rate. So I worked out what that was. And when I was first pregnant, we were coming into summer. So if the temperature was 25 degrees or over, then not exercising for more than 20 minutes in that. Um, if it was under that, I didn't, and particularly in the early days, I didn't really have time limits on myself. And then just being really mindful of hydration, fueling. I worked with a sports dietitian to make sure that I was getting adequate fuel. I had to watch my weight, make sure I was gaining enough weight, and all of those things. But yeah, I did find it tricky. I couldn't find much information about how much was too much.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was mostly around, yeah, I just used heart rate as um, I guess, gauge of how hard I was going. And that's because I think if I went off perceived effort, I would have been ranking things actually quite a lot lower than what my heart rate was saying. And I found that really interesting pretty early on in pregnancy. My heart rate was a lot higher for a much lower effort level.
Yeah.
So I could, where previously I would have been doing something and thought, oh yeah, this is a 6 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10. And, my heart rate might have been only 160 for that. It was all of a sudden, I felt like the effort was the same, but my heart rate was 175, So I had to, I actually found heart rate really helpful throughout pregnancy, just to, I think my perception of effort probably as a marathon runner sometimes can be a little off. So I needed something like that to control it a bit.
And would you recommend for the general public using a combination of the two, the rate of perceived exertion and also heart rate?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you've got, I mean, if you don't run a whole lot anyway, then your perceived exertion is going to be fairly high when you go for a run regardless. So sometimes that might be enough. If you have access to a heart rate strap, wrist heart rate on your watch is not particularly accurate. If you have access to a heart rate strap, and even if you don't know what your maximum heart rate is, if you use the 220 minus your age thing to have a rough idea, even though we know that's a little inaccurate too. But yeah, then I think that can be a good thing to use, just to make sure effort lines up with heart rate.
And with RPE, or the rate of perceived exertion, just dive into that, what that means for a runner.
Yeah, so that's where basically you're gauging level of effort. And so, I mean, there are two different versions of the Borg scale. There's 0 to 10, 0 to 20. We often actually use 0 to 10. So I would describe that to someone as 10 being your hardest race effort, 0 being nothing. And yeah, trying to find that I guess moderate range in there. So, working at about 5 or 6 out of 10, you don't really want to be going up to 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm not sure exactly actually what the guidelines say about that.
Yeah, I think this is the problem though, and this is the reason why I wanted to get you on, is because there's no clear information online where how you can go to government websites that have a clear direction with, say, whatever it is medically that you should do. With COVID or whatever it is, there was clear guidelines, but with this, there aren't necessarily clear guidelines that you can find, and you need to sort of go through several different studies to kind of just piece it all together. So it is a little bit confusing. And
Yeah.
look, I don't personally see a lot of women that are pregnant or postpartum. So it's out of my realm a little bit. So hence why I wanted to get someone like you on, that's A, been through it, but B, deals with it day to day with your run coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I've have coached a couple of people as well through pregnancy and coming back. And with the people that I've coached, I've actually told them to get a heart rate strap if they don't have one, and use that. Just, I mean, part of that is me just being on the safe side, making sure that I'm not pushing them too hard with what we're doing. And basically the training program is a reverse progression. So as the pregnancy progresses, it gets less and less and less. But yeah, it's really tricky. And I found I had to do the same thing. I had to, read lots of different articles and sort of take what I could from all of them. And probably the most helpful one that I found, which wasn't even really, a big study, but it was because there's not a lot of research in elite athletes either.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in general population and moderate intensity exercise. There's not a lot in highly trained athletes and vigorous exercise. So really the only one I could find that was sort of relatable was one with some cross-country skiers in Sweden or something. And
Yeah, I saw that one.
they essentially looked at the blood flow, the umbilical blood flow, and the effects that vigorous exercise had on that. And so they had a group of women, I can't remember how many, and only in some cases they found that when they were between 90 and 100% of their maximum heart rate, they had reduced blood flow. But it was like a lot of them didn't have any changes, some did. So they basically from that went, right, to be on the safe side, if you're keeping your heart rate below 90%, nobody had any effect. If you go over 90, there's possibly some effect on blood flow. Whether or not that has any effect on the fetus, they don't know. And it's also something that's really tricky to test, because you don't want to take 3,000 pregnant women and put them all through vigorous exercise and see if it causes any trouble.
Yeah.
So it's something that's, difficult to get a lot of research behind. But I think, elite athletes are probably the ones that are willing to test that theory a little bit. So they're probably, if there is the opportunity to do it in people that are exercising at quite a high level anyway, then it would be interesting. But for me, I figured I didn't need to be exercising that hard through that time. I was fairly happy still being able to run, and I just had to drop the intensity of my sessions, which I was still doing initially, and then gradually I just sort of wound it down to jogging, and then nothing at the end. But I still ran through till about 33, 34 weeks.
Yep. And how would one navigate each trimester? Because often the first trimester is not great in terms of morning sickness and that type of thing. How did you navigate it? But how should someone navigate through each trimester? And it sounds like intensity is the big thing that changes.
Yeah, I think like you said, it's morning sickness is a factor, and everybody's so different with how they feel. So a lot of people feel really fatigued at the start. I didn't feel particularly fatigued because I dropped my running mileage quite a lot. I was still actually running a fair bit early on, but because it
So
was
how
such a
how
big
much are
drop,
we talking there? Because you said you're about
yeah,
160 kilometers pre.
yeah. So I reckon I was 160, and then I reckon after I found out I was pregnant, it dropped to about 100, which sounds like it's still quite a lot, but the first few weeks that actually felt like a lot less than what I had been doing for the last few years. And then it basically just gradually went down from there. But I wouldn't say I had a lot of fatigue. I had some morning sickness, but I actually felt better when I was outside running. Um, and it was just gauging. Yeah, like I said, I spoke to people to try and get some guidance, and I really struggled to get any sort of instruction about what I should be doing. So
Mm.
I kind of just winged it a little bit with what I could read. Um, so I just tried to listen to my body. So if I was tired, I wouldn't run. And using heart rate as a guide, and then making sure that I was getting enough fuel for the amount of running I was doing, working with a dietitian, which this sounds like overkill, and it probably is for a lot of people. But obviously your energy requirements go up. And as my exercise was dropping, like it probably almost leveled out anyway to be eating kind of the same amount that I was eating through a marathon training block. Um, and then, just making sure, I guess, that I was putting on weight each week. It's the first trimester is tricky. Some people are a little more cautious in the first trimester, I think, depending on the experience you've had in the past as well. But research is telling us now that exercise doesn't increase your risk of miscarriage at all. So I think that's something that will give people peace of mind going forwards, that they can still get out and do things. Because I think it's also really important for your mental health, not just, reducing risk of diabetes and preeclampsia and things like that, but also if you're used to exercising every day and all of a sudden you stop, you're not going to feel great mentally. So initially I was probably still running every day, and then gradually I just dropped days. And then in the end, I think I was probably running 2 or 3 times a week for about 20 minutes. And I actually, I felt fine running the whole way through. I didn't have any pelvic pain or issues like that. I just had a few complications with my pregnancy, which made me stop, which, it probably, I don't think exercise or running had anything to do with it, but I think just in my own mind, I just decided to stop just in case there was any link there. But
Yeah.
I was speaking to doctors the whole way through who were saying, no, that's fine. What you're doing is fine.
So you stopped running at 33 weeks, you said, but your plan was to
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, my plan from the start, I basically never made a plan. It was, I'm just going to go week by week with how I feel. This is what I'm going to stick to from a heart rate perspective. And then I'll obviously gradually reduce my running, but I had no plan in place for how that was going to look, because I didn't know, some people stop running at 20 weeks because it becomes uncomfortable, or much earlier. So I wasn't sure. I know my sister, when she had her babies, she, from about 20 weeks, it started to feel uncomfortable for her, so she stopped. And I sort of thought that might be the same case for me, but I actually felt fine the whole way through. And my only I guess reason for continuing to run was I felt like if I could keep putting a little bit of that load through my joints and my soft tissue, I thought it was going to help afterwards with my return to running. And I felt like, it became less of a fitness thing and more of a mental health, and just keeping some kind of conditioning in my body, so that, yeah, when I started running again after having the baby, it hadn't been 9 months of absolutely no load or impact going through my legs. And still, like, I had a huge amount of muscle wasting and all of that, but I do feel like still maintaining some running in particular whilst pregnant, because you can do different things. You can walk, you can ride the bike, you can cross train, but it's not the same as the load you get from running. So yeah, that was probably the one thing in my head. I thought, if I feel okay, then I will keep doing a little bit of jogging for as long as it feels right, in prep for the comeback.
And speaking of the comeback went well recently in London.
Yeah, it went all right. Yeah. So I did.
I think you've got unrealistic expectations sometimes, Ellie. You just had a baby, and 1 year later, you're doing a marathon against the elite of the elite.
Yeah. I think I probably got a little bit ahead of myself. I felt like that marathon was always going to be, just like a block and a race, I guess, prepping for the next one. And so I decided, I initially wasn't sure if I'd do one within the first year. And then I was actually feeling really good after about 6 months or so. I was like, no, actually, I feel like my fitness is coming back. I'll do a marathon at 10 months. And yeah, I think probably as the block went on, I started feeling like, oh, I reckon I could nearly run a PB. And then, yeah, I went out trying to do that and slowed a little. So I was a few minutes off my PB, and I was a bit disappointed at the time. But probably when I look back on it and really think about the whole process and everything, yeah, I can't be too disappointed. But it's good to have the block under my belt and the marathon. And I got through, yeah, pretty much unscathed from an injury perspective. I had a slight little hamstring niggle about a month out, but yeah, it was good. It was a fun experience. Dragging a 10-month-old baby all the way to London was probably a little bit selfish. And yeah, jet lag was hits a bit harder when you have a baby in tow who is definitely more affected by it. But yeah, it was good fun.
Do you think going forwards with your running career, you having a baby now and then continuing on with your running career is going to be beneficial for your career?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like in the marathon, uh, we're pretty lucky in Australia in that we've already got all these women that have done it before. So
Mm.
I think a big part of it was that I never thought stopping to have a baby meant the end of my running career. Um, and yeah, it like I've been asked that a few times since, like, oh, so yeah, you're done with running, and I almost get a bit like get
Get
a
the
bit
shits?
yeah, get a shit to that question.
Yeah,
What?
yeah,
But
yeah.
but I have to, like, again, it traditionally that was probably what happened, but it's not the case at all. And we've got like all of our best marathoners nearly have had kids, come back and run faster after they've had kids. And it's obviously it's harder logistically, and I think having more than one child, makes it harder again. But yeah, I think I definitely don't think, I mean, physically, you obviously have to give yourself time to recover, but you've got a new level of motivation. You've got this forced break from competing, which, yeah, for me, I came off the Olympics, and then, like, so I just had so much motivation and fire in the belly, I think, and then fell pregnant, had this break. So then, you spend a year on the sidelines watching everybody else run marathons, and yeah, all it does, I think, is make the motivation stronger. And yeah, I guess you have some other extrinsic factors to motivate you then once you've had a child as well. So yeah, I think, yeah, I'm certainly not I'm certainly more motivated than I ever have been, and hopefully over the next few years I can try and run a bit faster.
What's worse, the pain of childbirth or the end of a marathon, or the worst part of a marathon?
Well, so I had an emergency cesarean section. So when you have a spinal block, it's not very painful. Um,
I didn't know this, so this is you heard
yeah,
it here first.
yeah. So I'll definitely say marathon is more painful from my experience, but I can't tell you what an unmedicated vaginal birth is like. Yeah, marathons, if you run them right, they're not, I wouldn't say they're particularly painful. Your legs stop working at the end.
I think you've said in the first or it was the first podcast, I'm pretty sure you said you hate the shorter duration stuff more than the longer duration stuff. It's often more
Yeah.
painful, doing
Oh
efforts or
yeah.
repeated 400s or something like
A
that.
5K. A 5K is way worse than having a baby. Marathon, not so much.
Yeah. Speaking of the Olympics, well done. Congratulations on 23rd place, I think it was.
Yep. Thanks.
And is Paris the goal?
Yeah, that's the goal. Yeah. So I've got just over a year. Um, and I'm hoping that I can try and squeeze a couple of marathons into that time to try and run the qualifier.
Yep.
It's going to be a hard team to make. We've got two women have already qualified, which were the two ladies that I was in the team with in Tokyo, Sinead and Lisa. And
Hmm.
then, yeah, there's another group of probably 4 or 5 that will be going for that third spot. So, yeah, I'm going to have to run fast to try and get on that team, but that's definitely the goal.
Sounds great. And how did you go about it after you had given birth? Obviously, things are slightly different, natural versus cesarean.
Yeah.
How do you go about it personally, and what's your recommendation for both natural or cesarean for that first sort of 6 to 12 week block postpartum?
Yeah, so I guess the number one bit of advice that I have for people is to see a women's health physio. And again, this was something that I tried to talk with the Sports Institute here in Melbourne about, like, as far as recommendations for who I should see, if there's anybody that has experience working with athletes, or just because it is a little bit different, or even an obstetrician that had any advice in my comeback. The sports doctors, yeah, didn't really have any idea about it. So I ended up seeking out a women's health physio in Torquay, actually, called Lynn Watts, she's got a very good reputation, is really well known. And I booked in to see her. I couldn't get an appointment till 12 weeks initially. And I knew that, like, often particularly after a cesarean, women's health physios recommend 12 weeks before you attempt a return to run. But again, this is a really grey area. So there are these rough guidelines, a few sort of key indicators that they look at to see whether or not you're ready, but it just takes nothing else into account. So you've got, women that have possibly never run before, women that did no exercise through pregnancy. Then you've got people that ran the whole way through to 40 weeks and then had a baby. You've got, yeah, vaginal births, C-sections, traumatic, like all sorts of things that I think go into it. So the best thing you can do is go and see a women's health physio and have them, listen to everything that you went through pregnancy, through childbirth, and then what you've been doing afterwards. And then they can sort of make a plan there for you. They'll do a pelvic floor assessment, a strength assessment. I think it's got to be really individualized there. And that's probably the one thing that I in the past have sometimes found a little bit frustrating with, I guess, the women's health information that you hear out there, is that there are sort of some of those general rules, and I just, yeah, I wanted them to look at me as, I guess, yeah, an individual, and what I'd done and the amount of work that I'd put in, I guess, to keep my body strong through pregnancy, and then also coming back, so that I could get back into running. And Lynn, who I saw, was brilliant. She assessed everything, and I'd been already doing strength stuff from quite early on. So pelvic floor, obviously with a C-section, you're a little bit limited to what you can do in the first couple of weeks, just because you've got an abdominal wound. So yeah, I just eased back into things. I'd started doing a little bit of gentle cycling when I saw her at 6 weeks. I think I'd probably been doing that for a week or two already, and I thought I might get in trouble, but she was really good. She was like, no, you're fine. And then she actually said at that point that I was okay and strong enough to start a return to run program. So from there, I did walk jogging. So 6 weeks, I started like 10 by 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. And then I just built up from there. So I was doing it every second day for a few weeks until I got up to 20 minutes continuous. And then basically built up from there. You can sort of, should be able to see I've got it all on my Strava. I did put my Strava on private through this time just because I was a little, again, conscious of, yeah, everybody's recovery being so different and not
Well,
having it all out
not
there.
copying you. People probably
Yeah,
would,
yeah,
they'd start to copy you, and you hit the nail on the head and beautifully answered it. It's individual. Everyone's going to have a different history with their exercise. They're going to have a different birth. They're going to have different complications that they may or may not went through. So you hit the nail on the head. I agree that it needs to be individual, and you need to seek medical advice.
yeah, yeah. I think so. And even like I was lucky that I had people that I could talk to, like some of the other girls that I run against who've had kids. So I had some information and resources from them with their recovery. Some of them had C-sections as well, which yeah is I guess slightly different. So that I found really helpful. But yeah, I think the women's health physio was the best thing. And I got to the point, like I reckon about 5 weeks after I actually felt like I could have run. I felt like my body was strong enough, but I think probably having a C-section for me in some ways was good too, because it did make me a little more scared
Yeah, yeah,
of overdoing it, because there's
yeah.
so much, a lot of hounding from the maternal child health nurses not to be doing anything. But yeah, and so I was really pleased when I saw her and she assessed everything and basically told me that, yeah, how I was feeling was, was right. Like I had, I still had some ways to go with getting strength back, but I certainly had an amount of strength that was going to enable me to do a little bit of running, and I just had to ease back into it. Yeah, which was good.
Yeah, and there's no rush. I think that's an important point, especially if you don't have, your career riding on the fact that you need to get back to a sport and you're just getting back into exercise. There isn't a rush, is there?
Yeah, exactly. And I was really conscious of not picking races straight away, because I knew that if I had races on the calendar, I was likely to rush it.
Yep.
So I didn't have anything lined up. It was basically just, yeah, wait and see how you go. And then only once you're back to full training, and, feeling good, then start making those kind of goals. Because yeah, you don't know. And even when I started running and it was all going okay, you still don't know if that's going to stay the same, because there's obviously really big injury risk in coming back, particularly, well, for a number of reasons. But if you're breastfeeding as well, there's, you're at higher risk of bone stress injuries, because you can get postpartum osteopenia. And then also, yeah, you've also still got the effects of the relaxin. Depending on your birth, you might have pelvic floor issues. Having a C-section, they've gone through all your abdominal muscles, so you're a lot weaker through your core. And then even like the crazy thing that I noticed was how much muscle wasting I had in my legs from probably the few weeks. Like I ended up having Tiggy a bit early, but the few weeks between stopping running, having her, and then for the first couple of weeks where I couldn't walk much, like my legs just wasted away to, yeah,
Even the
nothing, no
calves.
muscles. The cars were gone.
You're kidding.
Yeah, they're like yours.
Well played. Well played. Well,
Yeah.
well,
So
hopefully I'll never have to go through bed rest for a period of time. My calves would be that skinny. I'd be
you'll
like,
be in trouble.
yeah, just a full shank like my old man's. No meat on the bone at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Speaking
yeah,
of,
there's a lot of changes that happen that you have to respect as well when you're coming back.
yeah, well put. Last thing, pelvic floor. So a lot of women will potentially struggle with pelvic floor issues postpartum or throughout pregnancy. So what are some pieces of advice that you would give these women? I assume it's, again, go and see a women's health physio, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a women's health physio will they'll actually be able to make sure that you're doing your pelvic floor exercises properly, because that's probably, yeah, one of the big things there. I just was really conscious of doing them throughout pregnancy. So a lot of people wait until afterwards to start. And actually, that's probably another good point, which I didn't do during pregnancy, but going to see a women's health physio whilst pregnant as well can be really helpful, just because they'll give you some things you can do to prepare for the birth. Yeah, and give you some guidance of what you can start doing straight after, because you can basically start doing pelvic floor exercises as soon as you've had the baby if you're really keen, or you can give yourself a few days, but that's something that you can do from very early on. And yeah, that, I think, just the big thing is probably making sure you're doing them properly, because you can Google pelvic floor exercises and it will tell you how to do them, but they're fairly it's there's a bit of a, how would you describe it? There's like a little bit of an art to it. It's
A
not as
specific
simple as it
technique.
sounds. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there are some good cues on the internet, obviously, but yeah, I think a women's health physio again is your best option there, just to make sure you're doing it right.
Can you overdo it?
Yes, yes.
Let's talk about that.
Um, yeah. So like hypertonic pelvic floor is a big problem that a lot of people have, myself included. And I think that's actually probably something, often people that do a lot of exercise are a little bit more at risk of that. Yeah, again, just because you might be a little bit gung-ho with the pelvic floor exercises, but also in general, you're possibly hypertonic through your pelvic floor before you've even considered having children, and all of those things. So yeah, you can that can that can have an effect on labor, and also afterwards as well. I mean, yeah, it's the key there is learning how to relax your pelvic floor.
Yeah.
But that can, I mean, you would think that a hypertonic pelvic floor wouldn't give you any issues, but that can actually cause incontinence for some people as well afterwards. So a lot of people go to see a women's health physio thinking that they've got a weak pelvic floor or an underactive pelvic floor, and they're doing their exercises like crazy and they're not sure what's happening, but it could actually be the other way, and you need to learn, yeah, how to relax.
It's similar to when people have back pain, because you obviously get a lot of guarding when people have back pain, and
Yeah,
their back and their core muscles will guard for a long period of time. And often they don't need to get necessarily stronger. They need to learn how to relax their core and let their posture go and let their movement um, start to go to the point
yeah,
where those muscles then aren't tired at the end of the day when they need them. You know,
exactly.
the great analogy that Peter O'Sullivan often uses with back pain is, if you clenched your fist all day and then at the end of the day you tried to pick something up or you shook someone's hand, it'd be really hard because all the muscles are tired.
Yeah,
I would assume that that analogy makes sense with the pelvic floor in terms of it being hypertonic.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it can be like, it's quite responsive to stress as well. So you can have hypertonic pelvic floor just from being stressed, completely unrelated. Yeah, and same thing, like you said, it will then fatigue, and then when you need it, if you are running or doing exercise, then it might by that point be fatigued. And also, yeah, sometimes people with that sort of hypertonia in that area, you might also be a little overactive even through your abdominals and things like that. So that's probably the other side of it. If you're tensing, trying to do all this core strength stuff, or coming back from having a baby, and you're every time you're engaging your pelvic floor, you're also engaging all of your abdominal muscles. They're actually putting a lot of pressure down through your pelvic floor. So then when that fatigues from trying to support everything when it's basically being pushed against, then yeah, it's same thing can happen. So there's, yeah, women's health physio will be able to assess everything properly and tell you where you're at, which muscles in particular need strengthening, how to do that, and yeah, give you lots of good advice there.
Well answered, El. You've nailed it. I'm glad I got you back on, and I've had so many people reach out to say, get her back on, get her back on. And then,
I don't know if
then
I
when
believe that.
no, I'm serious. So Dr. Tom Cross, I'll shout out. Dr. Tom Cross is the sports doc here. He's the one doing the ACL bracing protocol here.
Yeah, I've
So
actually
he's
watched a seminar of his.
oh right. So he's the one that sends, there's a couple, but he's one of them that sends his running patients, the running podcast we've done. So you've got a big
Cool.
fan there.
Thanks, Dr. Tom Cross.
Yeah, indeed.
Tell him I like his knee bracing work also.
Yeah, he's doing good work. Well, thanks again. Where can all the listeners find you? And even if they wanted to reach out and start doing some of your running coaching that you do online?
Yeah, so runstrongonlinecoaching.com.au is our website for that. And then, yeah, otherwise I'm not working as a physio at the moment, but I'll get back there one day. But yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and all those things. I'm not particularly great on Instagram, but I'm Ellie Pash.
Ellie Opash, keeping the old
Yeah,
O'Kane last name. Just a little.
yeah, because it was Ellie O'Kane before, and then I couldn't quite get rid of the whole surname.
How fast, last question, how fast do you think you can go on the marathon?
Oh, so my PB is 2:26. I think I can take a couple of minutes off that.
Yeah, on a flat track, no doubt.
Yeah, I felt
Berlin's
like
really flat, isn't it?
Berlin's really flat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm looking at doing Berlin in September or Valencia in December, which is also
Yeah.
really flat. Valencia gives me a bit more time, which I think will be good. Yeah, but yeah, I'm not sure. Like so many things have to go right in a marathon, but I feel like before the Olympics last year, I got in the kind of shape that on a fast flat course in a cool conditions, because obviously in Tokyo it was like 35 degrees. Yeah, I feel like I can run a couple of minutes faster. So
Yeah.
that'll be the aim.
What's the Paris circuit like? Flat?
Really hilly.
Really? There you
Yeah,
go.
it's going to be a really hard course, which I actually like. I like hills, but I've got to get into the team first. So I'm going to need, and that's all just time based. So I'm going to
Yep.
need to run as fast as possible to get a spot on the team. And then if I get a spot on the team, then I've got to hit the hills.
You love the
There's
hills
plenty
like
of hills out the back of Aries.
you love the hills like the nail can back in Albury.
Yeah, yep. I think it's my Albury upbringing. There's plenty of good hills to run around there.
I
When
remember
we're on
doing that.
placement in Sydney,
Yeah.
a few
I
runs.
remember doing the nail can with you, like you were training for it and you took me there and I hated it. And I think that was maybe the last time I ran with you. I was like, nah, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, the first few times I did it, I hated it too. That was brutal. That first climb that goes for like a
Oh,
kilometer
it's so
straight
steep.
up.
So steep.
Yeah.
No thanks.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. We'll have to do a 2.0 on this topic, I think, because no doubt some people will reach out and be asking questions. So we'll organize that in the near future.
Yeah, no worries. And yeah, like everyone's different. So just yeah, you've got to get the right information, but then you've also got to listen to your body, I think is the key, both during and after.
Brilliant advice. As usual, stay strong.